Today is February 1st. In the United States, this is the beginning of Black History Month. It is a time when we stop to honor the people who fought for the world we live in today. And history has a powerful connection to this date. On this exact day, February 1st, in 1960, 4 brave college students sat down at a whites-only lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, and refused to move. It sparked a revolution. But those 4 young men were only brave enough to sit there because 5 years earlier, a woman in Alabama showed them how. She didn't sit at a lunch counter. She sat on a bus. Let me take you back to where it all started. It was Christmas time in Montgomery, Alabama. If you walked down the street on that Thursday evening in 1955, you would see red and green lights twinkling in the store windows. But if you looked closer, you would see that the spirit of giving stopped right at the front door. Inside the Montgomery Fair department store, hidden away on the 4th floor, the air was hot and heavy. It didn't smell like pine trees or peppermint. It smelled of industrial steam irons and damp wool. That is where Rosa Parks spent her day. She wasn't famous. She was a seamstress in the alterations room. For 8 hours a day, she hunched over men's shirts and trousers, fixing hems and sewing buttons. She made old clothes look perfect for white customers who wouldn't even look her in the eye. And perhaps because she worked so hard, history has remembered her incorrectly. You have probably heard the story. People love to say that Rosa refused to give up her seat simply because her feet hurt after a long shift. They paint her as a fragile old lady who just needed a rest. That is a lie. Rosa wasn't old. She was 42, and she wasn't physically tired. As she said later, the only tired I was tired of giving in. You see, she had been preparing for this moment her whole life. When she stepped onto that yellow and green bus, she wasn't looking for a fight. She just wanted to go home to her husband Raymond. She paid her dime, suffered the indignity of walking around to the back door, and found a seat in the middle section. But history has a way of finding you when you least expect it. The bus began to fill up. A few stops later, a white man got on. He stood in the aisle, expecting the world to move for him, and that is when the driver turned around. His name was James Blake. This wasn't the first time Rosa had seen his face. 12 years earlier, this same man had kicked her off a bus in the pouring rain. He was a bully with a badge. He shouted back to the middle row, "Let me have those seats." It wasn't a request. It was an order. The other 3 black passengers stood up. They shuffled to the back, heads down, just trying to survive the day. But Rosa? She just slid over to the window. The bus went silent. The engine was rumbling beneath the floor, but nobody breathed. Blake stormed down the aisle. He towered over her. He demanded, "Are you going to stand up?" Rosa looked up at him. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She spoke with the calm of a school teacher. "No," she said. Blake was furious. He loomed over her and threatened, "Well, if you don't stand up, I'm going to have you arrested." And that is when Rosa said the words that truly stripped him of his power. She didn't beg. She simply replied, "You may do that." In that moment, she wasn't a victim. She was the one in control. They arrested her, of course. They took her picture, mugshot number 7053. They thought that shaming her would make the problem go away. They thought the black community would just keep their heads down like they always did. Boy, were they wrong? 4 days later, on the morning of her trial, something miraculous happened. Coretta Scott King looked out her window and called to her husband, a young preacher named Martin. "Look," she said, "the bus is empty." It wasn't just that one bus. It was the next one and the next one. The community had decided to walk. Now, I want you to imagine what that really means. We aren't talking about a nice Sunday stroll. We are talking about maids, janitors, and factory workers walking miles in the freezing rain and the blistering heat. We are talking about shoes wearing thin until the soles had holes in them. But they didn't stop. They built their own system. They called them rolling churches, station wagons that acted like taxis, picking people up and dropping them off. The city tried to break them. They bombed Dr. King's house. They arrested the drivers. And then they played their dirtiest card. The city pressured the local insurance agencies. Suddenly, every single policy on the station wagons was canceled. The city officials smiled. They thought, "No insurance means no cars. We have one." But they underestimated Dr. King. He knew he couldn't find help in Alabama, so he looked across the ocean. He reached out to an agent for the most famous insurance market in the world, Lloyd's of London. Think about that. The racists in Montgomery could bully local businesses, but they couldn't touch a powerhouse in England. Lloyd's of London wrote the policy. The cars kept rolling, and the boycott continued. For 381 days, the buses stayed empty. Think about that number, 381 days. More than a year of walking, more than a year of refusing to pay for their own humiliation. One elderly woman was walking with a cane, struggling down the road. A reporter asked her, "Aren't you tired?" She stopped, looked him in the eye, and gave an answer that I think about to this day. She said, "My feet is tired, but my soul is at rest." Finally, in November of 1956, the Supreme Court slammed the gavel down. Segregation on buses was illegal. The wall had crumbled. When Rosa Parks finally got back on a bus, she sat right up front, and nobody said a word. She didn't have an army. She didn't have a fortune. She just had a purse, a sense of dignity, and the courage to stay seated when the world told her to move. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? We often wait for a hero to come and save the day, but Rosa taught us that the hero is just a regular person who decides they have had enough. So, here's my question for you today. Is there something in your life you've been tolerating just to keep the peace? A rule, a situation, or a habit that you know isn't right? Maybe it's time to stop moving to the back of the bus. Tell me in the comments, what is one thing you're going to stand up for this week? I'd love to hear your story. And if you want to keep walking through history with me, go ahead and click that subscribe button. We have a lot more ground to cover. This is Pop Pop. I hope you have a wonderful day or a peaceful night. Wherever you are in this big world, take good care of yourselves. Bye now.